So cool. Thanks for being willing to be part of the discussion. Um, I mean, Cinis, it's very interesting because I mean, you've heard my voice a lot. I've heard your voice a lot, but we've never actually talked until now. So it's
Yep,
nice.
and well, here we are.
Um, and then Chance, I watched a few of your past streams, just haphazard.
Yeah.
Um, and so you were pretty early doing speedrunning, at least compared to me. I only did it recently once I saw some of Sinis' stuff. But
Yeah, as far as I know, I'm not saying, and I definitely am not implying that I was the first, but when I did it, I hadn't seen anybody else doing it or attempting it or anything like that.
I was speedrunning in the public beta some, but it wasn't. I didn't record. It wasn't like hardcore by any means.
Right. Yeah, and I just kind of picked up speedrunning because that's something I do with other games, and I just wanted to see if it could be done with this, and then, how I wanted to go about doing it.
And clearly, you had a good strat.
So
Yeah, I was just... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, like, I was thinking, without putting too much into it, but I was like, I like what Stygian can do as far as the spells are concerned, and then I knew that, you could go big with units consistently with the Hellhorn, and so I figured I would look for either, volatile gauge or just to stack everything on one floor. And initially I was pushing more for volatile gauge, actually, to be able to, drop everything in my hand, play anything for 3 or less, and I figured that would also help out with the spells as well. But then, of course, you're still going to run into problems with Ember Energy, whatever you want to call it.
The thing is, Gauge is an excellent speedrunning tool, especially after it respects Ember Stones now. So it'll only randomize like an Inferno with cost -1 between 0 and 2. With that change, it's a great speedrunning tool in theory. The thing is, I think Never Nathaniel can speak with me on this one, that it just shatters my brain. I can't like play out the cards properly at all.
Yeah, like I'm so trained now onto 5, 6 card hands that when you get into 8, 9 card hands, it's just like too much visual input.
You cut out there.
Am I cut out, or was it?
You said 8, 9, and then I couldn't hear anything.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so getting 8, 9 cards in your hand, and then instantly my brain's like too much visual input, trying to sort out.
And then
go ahead.
And then I would mouse them out, right, rather than trying to match them to the keyboard. But you can't even really see what the cards are, especially because you normally recognize them by their cost.
Right, and that's why I tried to get away from both using, like, I had to train myself to get away from key bindings to use the mouse because I was messing around with volatile gauge so much. And then as far as cost was concerned, I don't really look at the cost outside of the fact, like, I recognize the numbers and do I have enough to play this? And if so, then secondarily I'll say, okay, what's my priority for a card?
So maybe let me back up and let's do the opening question. So like why speedrun? Why speedrun a deck builder game? Like, this is a common question that comes up on my world record run video. I think it came up with you, Cinis, as well. Why speedrun a game like this over something like classic stuff, Mario or Metroid or any of these more platforming, mechanically driven games? What is the appeal with a game like Monster Train, Slay the Spire, or any of these other deck builders?
My personal appeal is that I am mechanically garbage at almost all of those games. Like, I didn't grow up on them, and my hand-eye coordination and fine motor skills are just generally poor. So I can't really speedrun those, but I do like the idea of going fast. Part of it is I really enjoy this game, and the vast majority of it is because I enjoy being able to work with the limited resources and route out a plan ahead of time with this limited set of stuff available to me.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you.
Okay. you were still speaking. Finish off your train of thought.
Well, I completely forgot it as a result of this, so...
Well done me, then, I guess. I apologize.
Okay.
So, the reason why I appreciate this game as far as from a speedrunning perspective is concerned is exactly the reason you said. Like, I don't want to speedrun Mario. I don't want to speedrun Metroid. It lacks RNG there. I think it's exciting, and that's why I won't be. And I've got nothing against people that are going to do this seeded, but I won't do any seeded runs. I'll only run unseeded. I like the randomness. I like every run being different, and then I like, to Cinis' point, I like making decisions on the fly. Like, okay, do I want this card, and if so, is it more important than keeping my deck tight, making sure that I don't have too many cards. I speedrun other games as well, and the games that I speedrun are very, very, very RNG heavy. Like, I will reset, and it's not just Slay the Spire. Like, I did do that for a bit, but I speedrun a game called The Binding of Isaac, and it's insanely RNG heavy, where you have to reset for a specific start, and you're trying to like break it down, bit by bit. But I think the RNG is a big selling point as far as why you should and could speedrun this game, because you're looking for a specific start, and then building off of that. Like, I can't tell you how many times I reset when I'm speedrunning because I don't get a good unit banner or something like that. It's just like, all right, here we go again.
The thing with other games is that there's not a lack of RNG in them either. The roguelikes and deck builders are just much more upfront about it. Like, if you're speedrunning Mario, you've got enemy patterns to deal with. If you're speedrunning something like Legend of Zelda, I think Wind Waker had this whole big thing with trying to do RNG manipulation, and I know Pokemon speedruns are especially big on it. And going for pure determinism in those games requires ridiculous frame-perfect tricks, which are in their own right cool, but they're not at all accessible. And that's what's different with this game.
Yeah, I concur completely.
And I think that to a large extent, when I'm watching the speedruns of more mechanically driven games, I don't always appreciate the difficulty curve. You'll hear something like, oh, that jump was frame perfect. And it's like, okay, but what does that mean for me? Like, they push the button at the right time. I think it's hard, at least from someone who's not fully into speedrunning, especially speedrunning platformers and third-person action RPGs, things like that, where it is more precision-oriented. It's hard to appreciate when you're not in the thick of it, I think. I can appreciate, getting through a game quickly. I can appreciate, to a certain extent, breaking the game to try to find ways to, skip sections. But it's, for me, not so appealing. And with something like Monster Train, like, we're not going to be finding, a wall skip. We're not going to be finding a way to somehow skip to the credits sequence. I mean, if you want the credit sequence, you press credits at the beginning of the game, right? So there's not like the standard methods of speedrunning in a game like this, and it was the same with Slay the Spire. One thing I appreciate here is, compared to Slay the Spire, not to say one game's better than the other, but I appreciate that in Monster Train so far, we haven't had to do what they did with Slay the Spire speedrunning, which was create before they started doing seeded runs, right? So before seeds were available really early on, you had to do this weird save game manipulation so that you could guarantee that on your run, you would always start so that you knew Dono and Deco were your boss. Right. You had to do this whole save game thing to make sure you did not have a whole bunch of cards available, a whole bunch of the artifacts available or relics available. And so far, I get the impression that it's because of the way that Monster Train sets up, where you get an artifact at the beginning, you get early draft units. It's not so necessary to do weird save game stuff like that in order to optimize a run.
Yeah, I agree. But back to your point, however, as far as, the frame perfect and et cetera goes, I think the caveat to that, like that's kind of a double edge, because, and I'm not saying I'm this way, but just viewers in general, maybe it's easier to, watch Mario or watch a platformer and kind of have an understanding of what's going on. And I understand that, deck builders and everything, people watching it, it's kind of niche, so you're watching it for a reason. So you probably appreciate strategy and everything. But Monster Train, there's a lot of, oh, this is like Slay the Spire, is this, what is this? And so you do have to learn, you know, conceptually what the game's about and what the cards are and what the classes are. And I just think initially it's hard to get into, but then as far as, you know, to your point, all the tricks, the skips, the glitches, that they don't have to worry about.
Yeah, there's like a minimum threshold of game knowledge you need, and that makes it more accessible. Although I do think the way the deck builder works also is a flaw to some extent in speedrunning, because rather than optimizing in certain ways, you basically have to rewrite the strategy wholesale to get a non-mechanical time save. Because like I basically hit the wall at 626 with Inferno, and I'm sure if I did it seated, I could get it like 5 seconds faster or whatever. But if I keep grinding for Inferno seeds, at some point it becomes essentially untenable or like nearly impossible that I'll luck my way into both a better seed and a single run where I'm going to go faster. And that's why I switched over to Shadow Siege when I did, is because I knew I basically had to try out different strats. And that'll be interesting in a good way as the game balance changes. And as patches are applied that may change or even negate previous metas.
Yeah, I agree with you there, although I'm very cautious when I talk about hitting a wall this early into a game's release, because and I mean, this is without glitches, I'm not even talking about that. Just look at, you know, the progression of Slay the Spire, not to keep the comparison going, but I mean, they are similar. But the progression of Slay the Spire speedruns, it was just insane. What, you know, was previously thought impossible would be considered a bad run now in Slay the Spire, you know? And I just definitely see that in how quickly the progression happened just since the game's mainstream release, which is just north of a month now that it got out of beta. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, people have cut their time in half and then some, you know? So I do understand your point. I do agree with it. I'm there right now because before moving on to my next class, and I think we're going to get into classes later on, or characters, whatever you want to refer to them as, I wanted to stick with Stygian and push that down as low as I possibly can. But, you know, getting under 8, under 7 as Stygian just seems like that's going to be frustrating. But
the thing with this game, I've noticed, is that I have rarely gotten small amounts of time saves, especially in unseeded, because the seeds are just wholesale different. So I like grinded for 6 hours and got fully 5 seconds, and then I grinded for 2 or 3 hours for attempts before I got my 524 unseeded, and that was 30 seconds of time save. And that's probably just how it's gonna be for a while. And unseeded, seeded, I've got it all the way down to 455. And I have a general leg up because I was a private beta tester and I did a bit of speed running then, but my record in the private beta was only like 9 minutes. I've saved almost 4 minutes since then.
I think
so. There's.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was only going to mention that I think in terms of the skills that are being tested, and this is to exactly your point, Cinis, is it's a lot of theory crafting and deck building strategy, which is it's just a different type of testing, right? It's a different type of way to skill check someone. Is can they come up with the best possible setup, balancing, you know, yeah, you could have a theoretical god run, and there are some god runs that we've seen, some god seeds that have come up, but can you get something that's consistent enough that it's worth actually trying to test it? Like you could come up with even you know, insane melting remnant runs where you have, you get bounty stalker immediately on Daedalus, you're able to start the game with double extinguish triggers. Like you could imagine a setup like that, but you know, it's not really so realistic to, you know, to count on exactly getting all these cards, especially talking about rare cards. But then to say, okay, what's something using the uncommon pool plus the artifacts plus maybe a draft or two that is I could imagine maybe 1 out of every 100 rerolls compared to 1 out of every 10,000 rerolls, right? So it's like getting a strategy which is tenable, fast, and also to a certain degree realistic to draw in a run, in a seed.
And that's the advantage with unseeded, is the adrenaline rush every time, because you have no idea what it is you're getting into. And that's something that makes Monster Train speedrunning specifically different from every speedrun. Even like Slay the Spire, at its most optimized, was pure whirlwind, essentially, if I remember right. Whereas Monster Train evolves substantially more, especially because of the dynamic upgrades, throughout the course of a run in, honestly, quite often unexpected ways. Where that's not as true for traditional speedrunning, where you put in the work, and that is impressive, to get the frame-perfect, perfect mechanics. It's really a different, almost genre of running.
I agree. But I mean, to your point of, being able to adapt what's given to you in lieu of looking for, say, the absolute perfect rare card setup with artifact and everything like that. You kind of compromise a little bit and say, okay, I can't expect to get this, but I know I can work with this. I think it's a matter of patience, and maybe you do kind of push the threshold and do go for the better start, and then kind of, at least for me, this is my perspective as far as the speedrun is concerned. Like, you do look for a near perfect start, and then we get into adaptability later on, even maybe on the next floor, the next section. That's when we start adapting. Like, okay, I didn't get the perfect unit, or I didn't get, I don't know, a keepstone that I wanted for this particular spell with this class that I'm running, and then we start adjusting. But I think initially, especially with optimizing and not hitting the wall, back to Cinis' point, I think you do need to look for a near perfect start.
The nice thing about this particular game is you can just do that, but that is not, like, unreasonable. Like, Sketch's Shadow Siege, which is what I've got my world record with, happens, like, 1 every 200 runs with the requisite upgrades, I would guess. It's a 1 in 30 shot to hit Sketches. And of those runs, it's probably more like 1 in 300, probably 1 in 10 to get Shadow Siege over the course of all the banners. And then 1 in 2, 1 in 3 to get the upgrades you need. So it's probably approaching 1 in 5, 1 in 600 to work. But the thing is, this game resets so quickly.
Right.
And I think correct me if I'm wrong here, Chance, but I think it's much faster than Spire in that regard.
And you don't have to do, I was going to mention, not only is it faster, but you don't have to do the whole get to the boss in order to get the initial gifts.
Right, both because of, to Nate's point, setup, which is the most tedious, in my opinion, when it comes to Slay the Spire, and then, in addition, to use it as, just hitting escape and resetting the run, if we already know what, class and subclass we're going to be using, that's just right there. It's like restart with a new randomized run, yes. And then you're right there. The train's coming back down the track. We're checking our artifacts, our cards, depending on what we're going for, and then moving on.
And I'll probably come back to this point again later when we talk about current issues or what we see needing to be developed further. But I will say you never want to do your first run, because that extra 6 seconds to load the run is less than the 2 seconds it takes to do a reroll. So it's, in my perspective, even if you start with the God run, you're still down 4 or 5 seconds just because of the time difference to press that new run button versus just restarting the run.
100% agree, and that's why I don't even look at the artifact ever. I don't want to know. Like, I really don't.
I'm not gonna lie, I have accidentally reset through the artifact or cards I wanted at least like 5 times. Yeah. Just because I reset so quickly, and it's just in my muscle memory of the exact speed I need to go. So sometimes I'll see like, oh, that's Sketches. Whoops, I just reset.
So
I've been there too.
Why don't we transition now into the current main builds that are run? Maybe even progressions for some of those builds. I think all of us started with Stygian. I mean, I basically copied Cinis's for my 5-hour-long world record hold. And then we continued to push it from there. But even before that, what were some of the earliest builds that you guys were running?
So my very first speedrun, all the way back in the public beta days, used just a simple like Demon Fiend, Alpha Fiend strategy, and that was like 17 minutes. It was garbage. It was just playing the game quickly. It wasn't really a speedrun. But I tried to optimize that for a little while, and then someone put me onto the Engraft Infinite. And that was quite the RNG fest.
Well, Engraft was different
resetting.
back then too, right? On the public beta, Engraft drew immediately. It wasn't a draw your next turn.
Right, yeah. So all you had to do was purge yourself down to a couple Engrafts or cost-reduced focus growth, because it drew one immediately at the time, too. But there was no reroll on shops, nothing of the stuff you would really have wanted to make it more consistent. And even about half the time, a run that got the starting cards necessary would still fail because either Rejuvenate Sentient wouldn't be drawn, or because Consume Seraph would make the run impossible. So that was very RNG, but I toughed it out and I got like I think like an 11-minute world record. And that is the public beta record for all time.
Nobody's dethroning you. That's nice to have, man.
And nobody would
and
try,
then from there, I got into the private beta, and this isn't technically under NDA anymore. I did originally essentially a prototype of the Inferno run you see now, where I used Spell Weakness Tethys and a tank unit, and then rather than spamming the Infernos, I would one-shot whatever with the Inferno on the second floor, or stack Spell Weaknesses on the flying boss, and then kill it with Inferno. And that was much slower because against non-boss enemies, you had to play out a full round of combat. And that was also before there was automatic super ultra speed. So I had to right-click, which makes things even slower. And that got down to like 9 minutes and something. And then the Inferno strat, as you know it now, slowly came into being with the cost reduce, holdover, duplication stuff. And I pushed that down, and then Chance can probably pick up here with his sketches stuff.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much from the very beginning of my first attempt at speedrunning, it was due to I think, I want to say it was Covenant 18 or 19. I don't know. I was just randoming through Covenant. And I got sketches, and I ended up with, I don't know, something. It was pretty inconsequential compared to what we go for, but it was, I don't know, it was like 150 damage on the floor. So it wasn't awful, but it wasn't what we need. And I was like, you know what you could do? Because this is really fast. And I'm like, making sure the game speed is all the way up, and I'm like, this is fast. Like, I bet this could be speedrun. So immediately I went into resetting for, again, either Volatile Gauge or Sketches of Salvation. I was looking for one of those two artifacts. I had it stuck in my head that Gauge, because of the additional draw, and I mean that ends up becoming a problem, not just for what you said, but because of blights, which can be randomized as well, and then it's just terrible. But so I was looking for that. I said, I can lay down whatever I want, but then capacity became a problem, right? So eventually I settled on, I'm going to need sketches, because capacity is no longer an issue. The capacity is then, 7 units, not so much. I can only fit 5 capacity on this floor, 6 capacity, whatever. I don't care about that anymore, because I'm starting with whatever I want to once I purge everything unnecessary out of my deck. And then that evolved into, yes, I'm running sketches, but in addition to that, I want Inferno, I want a souped up Ice Tornado, I want something like that I can cast every turn just to wipe anything insignificant out, because though it's great and sketches is really fast, what I was finding is the attack animations are taking, like, they add up, they, like, I'm going to wipe whatever out, but the more attacks that occur, the more seconds pile up over the course of a run. So that's where I realized, casting spells was faster.
But then quick comes in is the thing, and that's what I think drives Shadow Siege to the top. Is quick eliminates half of the attacking animations.
Yeah, no, I'm always looking for quick. I totally agree with you. That definitely saves time. I still would prefer the spells just because it's instantaneous and it's a floor lower, right? So I don't have to watch them move up a floor. I don't have to worry about watching the attack animations, as insignificant as it is. But, as I'm sure all of us are seeing now when we're trying out new strategies or practicing or trying just to push our PBs down or go for world record, whatever it is, every little second counts or half second counts. And, those half seconds add up over the course of a run. You'll end up with an extra 10, 15 seconds you could have saved, which is very, important. That's something we do want to save.
Yeah. And I'm skeptical of Inferno spells just because the countervailing factor to that is how much decision making and reaction time is required. Because we're all humans, and since we're all speedrunners, we're probably relatively fast reacting humans, but that's still 0.2 seconds every time a hand is drawn, whereas Shadow Siege, you literally just press end turn. So prior knowledge of where everything's going is so important in this run. That's why holdover is so good.
So let me talk about maybe we go through clan by clan. So Hellhorn Stygian, currently Inferno is the king. There is potential that a Sketches Consumer of Crowns could be faster, but I think in the end it's much, much less consistent. So the question is, I don't know, I think it's much easier to push an Inferno time down than it is to push a Consumer of Crowns Sketches run down. And
mechanically, I feel like we are farther from the best possible run with Inferno, because Consumer of Crowns, you just get and you press end turn, and it's kind of capped at however good it is based on the seed, where Inferno, there's certainly adjustments and strats you can change. And Inferno's the only one of the strats so far that we've developed specific sub-strategies or techniques to use on certain fights, like waiting for the second floor of enemies so that you can hold over energy siphons through the brief respite wave. That's not something you see in Shadow Siege or even in Bramble Lash.
And as well, there's I think my personal best run is still on a single Inferno. It was not duplicating the Inferno, but instead duplicating the double stacked energy siphon, which adds 200 damage rather than 100 damage, right? So there are.
Yeah, I think that's a better strategy.
It's again, it's that trade-off between consistency and total possible lowest, or not maybe total possible, but the fastest possible time, right? And then because then you get into issues of, okay, I only have one Inferno, so what happens when I'm on Seraph and I have a death floor about to show up onto my pyre and I have only one Inferno? So
yeah, I do think with perfect mechanics the energy siphon is absolutely faster, just because it is directly more damage. Double Inferno is honestly kind of a crutch.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's to make sure that you don't get completely screwed by well, on one hand, draw, right? We've learned from, I think back in your very first runs, removal's really slow. It takes a long time to remove cards. It's faster if you get the void. It's really slow when you're doing it through the store, and so you just hope for the draws at this point, because those 5 seconds, 6 seconds to remove a card through the store, you can't afford it. So getting second
going
Inferno,
with a single Inferno also lets you refrain from taking energy and instead take draw.
Right. Yes. Which then so there's always that trade-off, right? So you take the draw, but then you get extra screwed by Fel when Fel's doing his or her.
Well, with Inferno this optimized, there's simply no way that Scourge Fel will ever get a record for that strategy.
You can't have it in the seed. You can't have any Scourge in any of the seed. So that's, I would say, pretty much where we're at right now with Hellhorn. And I would expect that the Infernal strat basically is the mainstay there. One, because it's just a hell of a lot more fun than a Sketches run. and
Inferno's the
two,
most satisfying card in the game, bar
yeah,
none.
it is. And I think the RNG mechanics, you're not doing artifact RNG, which is first off fantastic because rerolling for artifacts is much less fun, I think, than rerolling for cards. But yeah, it's fun to play. And there's a lot of mechanics involved. It's not just the store mechanics like you get with the Sketches run. Moving on to Awoken, I think this is still relatively new. As you mentioned, Cinis, the early in beta was doing these kind of rejuvenate triggers with what is it? With
double engraft or double focus growth.
Yeah, exactly. And we're right now trying the Bramble Lash, which seems okay. I don't know.
For Awoken, it seems like the best strategy. The thing is, Awoken is just by definition a kind of mediocre speedrun class, just because their whole kit is specifically defensive. Like, at best, you're wading through a bunch of regen ticks, and you can't just pop enemies with a single attack animation like you might be able to with something like Shadow Siege or Inferno or whatever. Awoken is nice because it seems to be one of the more consistent speedruns once you get into the run. Once you've got your holdover Bramble Lash, Awoken is not exactly lean on regen or spikes or other things that help you support the build. And that's what I encountered in my, basically my proof of concept run that I uploaded just today, is that I could pick up like a Spreading Spores, Cycle of Life, Wildwood Sack that were all absolutely helpful and made the run much faster.
And
which is a different experience than any of the other clans so far, where you're targeting specific cards. For Awoken, you're just kind of assembling a menagerie of things that work.
I think and you made the point earlier, Chance, with regards to animations, and I think that's one of the major downsides. Even if you get an optimized Awoken run, it's almost entirely going to be defensively oriented. Bramble Lash can't sweep, right? You can't kill the whole floor with Bramble Lashes. You don't have enough Ember, you don't have enough Bramble Lashes. So you're going to end up having a lot of combat animations, and I think how to avoid combat animations is almost the crux of getting fast runs in Monster
Agreed,
Training.
but I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I agree with you completely, but I think that's part of the appeal of Awoken, almost a break from the monotony. And again, I have every intention of running all the classes, and I don't want to just rely on having, all right, let's make Hellhorn my secondary for everything, and then I'll just look for exactly what I'm looking for with Stygian and pretend like I'm not even playing that class. And I know you intend on getting into other classes later, but just to that point, I think it is nice to break up the monotony, especially with how tedious speedrunning is when we are resetting, as quick as it may be, for these specific combinations of cards in your case where you prefer cards to artifacts. I'm not saying right, wrong, indifferent, or artifacts to cards. Either way, you're still looking for very specific things, and it can get tiresome. It wears on your brain. You're like, I don't really want to do this anymore. So being able to switch it up and maybe look for a different combination with a different class is nice.
And at this point, it's probably worth segueing into the categorization for speedruns in the future, now that we're getting off the ground with different clans and different rule sets once we inevitably ban sketches.
And that's... go ahead.
I don't think a sketches ban is going to happen, or I don't think it should happen. I could see it being with or without, there'll be people that are going to run this game seeded, obviously. It just happens in speed runs. It does. But obviously there's going to be seeded and unseeded categories because that's how games break down with this much RNG involved, that where seeds are available, that is. But I think class by class separation is imperative, to say the least. I don't think, you can run Awoken against Umbra. I don't think you can run Remnant against Stygian. I think it should be class by class, and then I think there should be a category with where you run all 5 classes too, like just in a group and you segment out of them. But I mean,
and
that's...
Nate and I were talking about that. We completely agree with you.
Yeah.
And we also thought about imposing the additional rule that not only do you need to run every primary class once, you need to run every secondary class once. So that you can't just slap Sketch's Shadow Siege onto whatever main class you happen to be playing and call it world record.
Or same, Hellhorned alternate, and you just go Inferno on every single clan. It's not very exciting.
Yeah, I don't think you should be able to do that either. But to you guys' point, my question is, does that mean like for each class? So like, okay, I'm gonna run Hellhorn first, right? Then I run Awoken as my secondary. Does that mean when I run Remnant, I cannot have Awoken as a secondary? Is that what that means, or do you mean
we've tossed it around like that? So we've tossed it where you have to use each class once as a primary, each class once as a secondary. But honestly, I think there's a lot of discussion still to be had around this area. I mean, there's even the full single clan run. So I want to see what's the fastest time if I run Hellhorn 4 times, once with each subclass, right? So I think there's a lot of different variations that can be done. And then we're not even talking about, do we do that seeded, unseeded? I mean, doing an unseeded all clans run. Do you count? When do you do timing? Right? Do you count just the in-game times, or do you count all the re-rolling times? Like,
well, what I would think at that point would be that you would use a third-party program. I mean, that's the only way it makes sense. Where you would start your timer as soon as you start your initial reset, and then you go through it that way. Segment it however you want. So Hellhorned, Awoken, Stygian, Umbra, Melting Remnant, and then it's just a live time rather than in-game time. And then we could get into if that's the case, then should we be using live time for a single character? I don't think that it should be the case, but I wouldn't want to, just from again, other games that I do run involving multiple clans, characters, whatever. Your first character, the timer doesn't start with that until you begin your run. But all subsequent characters, your timer's running throughout. So as you're transitioning, your timer's running. That's you need to be quick with the menu. Like, all right, now I'm going back to the main menu, back into this, and this is my clan that I'm picking now. So,
I mean, it's not like we're avoiding menuing at all. It's impossible to avoid menuing.
No, I wasn't. That's not what I was implying. I was just saying all that does add on to your time because it would be live time in lieu of in-game time because there's no real way to track that, right?
Especially not with the resets if you're going to do them.
Right.
So I think
the thing that's interesting with this particular idea, though, especially if it's going to be quintuple unseeded, is that even with the meta strats, runs can just die.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's something.
Right, and I think that's part of the appeal. I think if you get into seeded, I mean, at that point, I understand it's a deck builder, and I understand that it's not a platformer, but you're pushing it real close to platforming at that point, right? You're pushing
it's pure mechanics, and I don't like seeded speedruns for this game as a concept. I just worry they'll be necessary once seeds get incredibly optimized, and it's basically unfeasible to get a better one. But as long as we can do unseeded, I think we should.
I think unseeded can comfortably remain a thing indefinitely if that's what it comes out as, and I think that'll add to the appeal rather than detract from it. I understand, like, if we got 3 clans in and then the run just died because we died, and it's like, oh god, like I was on a PB pace or a world record pace and my run died. But see, I like that. That's what appeals to me about roguelikes, about deck builders, about stuff like that. I like that the run can die. Then that's what. So when you do complete a run, when you do PB, if you do get the world record, it's all the more better.
It almost feels a little bit like doing hardcore mode on like Diablo or one of those games, right? Like when your run's dead, it's dead. You can't just pull up the seed again and do it over. You can't just save and quit.
That's what I like about unseeded.
Sure.
So the way that I can imagine it
quintuple
going,
unseated, it's just gonna be scary, is all. But that's not necessarily a bad thing.
the way that I can kind of see this going is, I think if you just look at Slay the Spire, you have any percent unseated, any percent seated. I don't know that there will be a Covenant 25 speedrun. Maybe it becomes a thing. A lot of the strats that we're doing right now, like even the sketches strat, probably can survive on Covenant 25. But I think the all clans will be one. And I think it's, for me, even seeded is still kind of interesting, because then you're talking about, imagine if we put in a restriction like that, right? You have to use every primary clan, every secondary clan. Then it's theory crafting. What is the best combination of seeds? It's not just, I mean, it is pure mechanics, but it's pure mechanics within the grounds of like, how can I come up with the best combination of clan seeds to get an overall optimized run? And
right, I get where you're coming from there, but isn't that like finite? Like, eventually everyone running will agree that this is the best combination, these are the best seeds, this is how we do it, and then it'll just be about mechanics at that point. And that's something that I will avoid. I'm not saying that it shouldn't exist. I just will always avoid any kind of seeded. To your point with Covenant, I think if that does ever come up, any Covenant whatsoever in speedruns, anytime you change a game to hard mode or anything like that, it's so niche that it's, I mean, there'll be like 1 or 2 runs at it, even if the game gets popular, that people just want to have their name somewhere for a certain thing. But I think it's going to end up being no Covenant. I think all clans will be a thing. I agree with you completely. I'm diehard against seeding.
And
I mean, I think unseeded and seeded are probably both going to end up being things. And I'm intending to run both of them because they are 2 different experiences. And I think we should probably have both of those available too.
I agree that they should both be there. I 100% agree. I wasn't. If I came across otherwise, I apologize. It's just
That's good.
I will avoid it like the plague. I want nothing to do with seeded. It's just not interesting to me.
so
Gotcha.
why don't we go into now, since I was hoping to keep this to an hour, so we got about 15 minutes left, but I thought it'd be good to talk about what do we see as potential issues or things where I would say the game itself could be improved to make it a little bit more friendly. Maybe I'll start off with my one, which is that Cinis and I have more or less concluded that your setup affects the speed of your run. We've done, I wouldn't say identical side by side, but running the same seed with almost the same level of mechanics, maybe slightly faster, we're seeing like 20-30 second differences.
Yeah. The mechanics should be about somewhere between like 5 and 10 seconds worth. It is not like the 30-second difference we've been seeing. And I've noticed a difference actually between my own setup when it's plugged in and when it's on battery. Have remarkably different processing powers and thus remarkably different animation speed. And so some way to standardize that is like the elephant in the room for speedruns.
Yeah.
Because I think you should, if given equal animations, either have the Inferno world record or be very close to it.
That's my feeling as well. Not just because my own pride was wounded when I lost it so easily, but also just because in terms of fairness, right? Like you want it to really be on the user, not that the game itself is actively hurting your chances because you didn't get that new GPU and now you're screwed. So I think
it's a class divide. That's the worst possible thing.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure I understand that you're referring to your PC setup and everything like that, but are you saying lowering, graphics quality and everything, that doesn't help?
Settings don't change a thing as far as we can tell.
I got 5 seconds. I got 5 seconds from playing full screen. That was the biggest difference I did, was putting it into full screen compared to what I normally play as in windowed. That gave me 5 seconds, and the animations were a little bit smoother.
And again, the graphics quality did nothing, whether it was low or high.
No,
nothing.
whether it was low or high, it didn't change speed.
Huh.
So I think it would be good to. I thought about doing like an official message to the devs just to say, can you look into this and see what impact, if any, system setup has on animation speed, and if there's a way
the best thing to do would have like a setting that would simply cap it.
That's what I was going to say. If you could just cap it to say everyone plays at best this speed, and that's the default for anyone that's speedrunning.
Because the nice thing about this game is it can basically be played on a toaster. It doesn't require much specs, but if the animation speed suffers, then maybe we'll have to play it with agonizingly slow animation just for the sake of equality. And figuring out where exactly the dividing line is will be important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even realize, to be honest, that was an issue. That I'm using a secondary PC right now because, unfortunately, my main one needs to be repaired. I don't know what the hell went wrong with it. It was brand new, but I do hit some frame drops and everything in other games. I just haven't realized, or I haven't noticed any problems with this. Though I probably would in a side-by-side comparison with which you guys have been fortunate enough to see. And I didn't realize that. I do, however, find it very surprising that adjusting the graphics don't do anything. I'm not surprised that full screen does affect it, but I'm very surprised.
I can try some further tests, and probably will if we're going to formally contact the devs.
Did you tweak frame rate and everything? Did you try that?
I haven't. I've still kept it at 59 frames per second. I could try dropping it down to lower target frame rates. Maybe that would improve it. But either way, and we're talking about, I would say, my specs are also pretty good. Like, I'm running most games. I have an SSD. I have a decent GPU. When we're talking about anyone that wants to speedrun who has, a standard hard drive, so then load times are affecting, how long does it take to load the battle, how long does it take to load the map because you don't have an SSD. Like, that all starts to play into it a little bit more than it would in other types of games.
I believe load times are excluded from in-game time.
Are they?
I'm not 100% on that, but I recall as they are.
If that is the case, right? Even if that is the case, looking down the line, if we are looking to do all clans and everything, we can't. Are you saying that you would be looking to just add up the times, like all your in-game times, and not run a live timer?
It really depends on whether or not it's feasible to get standard speeds across different computer setups. If it's going to be substantially different, in-game timer becomes more important.
Yeah.
Because it's a little bit more reliable than out-of-game timers if you're talking load times and stuff like that.
When I originally did speedrun in the public beta, sorry for talking over you there.
You're good, go ahead.
When I originally did speedrunning in the public beta, I chose in-game time over real time as a metric for that reason, that load times are precluded, and that makes it fairer across platforms and across setups. But obviously that's not a perfect metric because the setup still influences the animation speed. So it's a legitimate question, and I'm not really sure what the answer is yet as to how we're timing all clans. Because resetting for a specific strat isn't unreasonable in all clans, considering there's still plenty of chance to die or otherwise screw it up. But then the logistics of adding up an in-game timer and the resets and the first run loads and whatnot are still substantial.
I guess my only concern with that is, and it's minor at best, is at that point, anything you're doing with menuing and making decisions there is negligible, right? Like, we don't care about you taking your time on what class I'm going to run next, what clan I'm going to run next, what the secondary clan is going to be. It's, take your time, think your strategy out, and then timer starts when you jump back in.
And you can reroll unlimited, and it doesn't count against your time.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the secondary right there, which is definitely going to impact the time even more significantly. Which you're just infinitely re-rolling for the optimized, or what you feel to be the optimized seed, and then timer starts?
I'm going to say that re-rolling is a feature, not a bug, of the actual speedrun in this game. Because if you're looking for an experience without re-rolling, those are relatively easy to come by, even as like not quite a speed game, because you've got Hell Rush, you've got something I can't actually spoil, but something like that will be coming soon. But you already have that no re-rolling experience.
Right, but that's not what I was referring to. I was talking about for, as far as timing is concerned, if we're running all clans, then, and we're just using in-game time, then re-rolling for a good seed isn't going to go against your time.
Right.
Yeah. So I think the ideal world, right? So if we imagine that in the future this all gets addressed and you have a time really is a time and it's comparable across all different setups, out of game timer is going to be necessary for all clans if it's going to be fair, because then you're including the reroll time, and it's a decision that you make. Is it worth rerolling, losing time in order to get a better setup that I'm more likely to defeat the boss, so survive first and then survive quickly?
Agreed.
Yeah, if we have a standardized time, there is no reason to use in-game time in any run.
Outside of single character, maybe.
Yeah, single character.
Yeah, single character is arguable, but in a theoretical perfect world, all clans should be lifetime.
Agreed.
In terms
Until then, though.
In terms of the actual logistics, so I did already submit to speedrun.com my run as because you have to give an example of a speed run for the game. So I'm still waiting on their decision whether Monster Train will be added. I expect it will be fine.
I did the same a while back. I submitted a run under Stygian with a video.
Okay. So as soon as we get that up online, we can decide at least how we initially want it to be set up, and co-moderate. Whether that stays in the future is, I think, still to be decided. And then I really think it's quite important for the future and the health of this type of run or type of speed running to make sure that we get some feedback from the devs about what can be done to support getting some more comparable performance.
Especially if we're going to try things like live races, which would absolutely be fun and something I want to try.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, we are already planning to do live races with Hell Rush customized times, right? So, which they showed off in the last stream.
Yeah, so, I agree completely. I think that should definitely be a thing. And I at least this early on into the game's official release, from what I can see on just in this Discord alone, the devs seem to be very active. So I think that they're looking for, which is very intelligent on their part, any way to get their game out there more well known and have more people appreciating it. And speedrunning is a huge draw for any game.
And I'm in the secret channels, and they're even more responsive there. Not that they aren't in the public channels as well. But I've already submitted like a speedrun wish list that changes combat speeds. And one of the potential suggestions I made was adding an instant combat speed with no animations. Since they already have the combat preview, it seems possible to just immediately play out that result. And that eliminates almost all animations and thus allows for more parity. As silly as abolish all animations sounds and is.
Well, I mean, I think eliminating animations would be, if there were a way for that to be implemented, at least attack animations. Obviously, we would want that. Like, that would be a positive. And then people that want to run the game casually or play the game casually, just they would have the option not to turn on that feature. I think eliminating animations in any game is a huge feature, and I mean it's a blessing to speedruns in general.
Yeah, the day before launch, I submitted this, and they said they want to improve it. Just they have a lot of things on their plate, fairly obviously.
Yeah, and I think if it's a choice between adding more content that is widely used across all users and appeasing the 5 to 10 people that are speedrunning, I think there's a clear priorities there. But
Oh yeah,
I think down the line, and I think to your point, Chance, it's really about it's only to their benefit to continue to service the hardcore group as well, because as much I think right now it's still early. A lot of people are enjoying watching standard Covenant 25 runs, but eventually that's going to die out where it's not so interesting anymore, and then it's more about creativity, speedrunning, and these other types of things that I think are going to be more mainstays until more content comes into the game. And there I think I can't imagine that they're going to ignore these types of issues.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Right now, Covenant 25 is incredibly appealing to, or at least significantly more appealing than speedrunning to a majority of people, because I would say a majority of people haven't yet, been able to beat Covenant 25, or they're struggling through Covenant in general. So they're watching those videos, trying to figure out how are they doing it, how can I do it, and that's just more appealing to them right now. But once the majestic part of Covenant 25 wears off, and nobody's awestruck by being able to beat the game on Covenant 25, and that's old news. To your point, it is very important for something refreshing, and it always, and I mean always, comes down to speedrunning for any game. Any game that's still alive, that's an older game, is alive almost solely due to speedrunning.
Yeah, that's like Breath of the Wild, or what Breath of the Wild will be soon. Is that it's like a 2015 or 16 or 17 or whatever it was game, and it is probably one of the most active speed games at the moment. At least from where I sit. So yeah, Monster Train's got quite a while left in its working lifetime. But speedrun support is something the devs are clearly interested in.
I think the other direction could be, and I based on the stream, and I assume you know more Cinis than we do, but PvP is the other way, right? You get speedrunning, or you get high profile PvP play. So we're at time. At least I wanted to keep it to an hour. What I'd like to do, and this is my invitation to both of you as well, is do a regular discussion. I think speedrunning is top of mind right now because we've been doing a lot of it in the last couple of weeks to try to push the world record and to push what we can do with the clans. But I think there's a lot of other topics that'd be interesting to cover. Covenant 25 itself. How do we feel about the current state of Covenant 25, Hell Rush, the daily challenges, and so on. So yeah, if you guys are okay, let's try to get back together again, do another state of the game, maybe come back to speedrunning again in the future. But again, really glad to have the discussion with both of you.
Agreed.
And productive too.
Yep, I appreciate you having me here for it. I definitely enjoyed the discussion. I would most certainly be down to do it again.
Great.
As long as I can do this time slot, and I see no reason why I can't. I'm happy to do this weekly.
That's what I was thinking. Either week or bi-weekly or weekly. Probably weekly early on, since we are getting more content coming soon. I think it'd be good to do also some impressions on new content coming in. Maybe we get some other streamers in. Like even Salink, I've thought about inviting him. He hasn't speedrun yet. I looked at some of his stuff. He's not really speedrunning, but maybe when we start talking about high covenants and daily challenges, he'd also be one to include.
Sounds good.
Great. Yeah. Then with that, I will switch back, finish my daily challenge, and talk to you guys later.
All right. Best of luck to you, Nate.
Bye.
Bye.